Since our company was in Wyoming, every year they had the Wyoming Tech Summit. And
how big was that event?
Not very big. We ended up at the after party at somebody's house, and somebody came up to us because he heard us talking about doing cloud computing. And I said, hey, you guys are in cloud, but we can't get access to any Nvidia chips. Can you guys help us? And I remember asking him, I said, do you think any of your portfolio companies would consider AMD? And he said something that changed the trajectory of everything for us. He says, as long as it works, absolutely, we'll put it in front of our portfolio companies and push it. And so that next day, we're like, this is it.
The Compute 100 is a podcast about the most consequential market in AI.
These are the conversations with builders and investors about the technology and the capital powering the greatest infrastructure build out ever.
I'm Brian Schechter.
I'm Gabby Lorenzi.
We're investors at Primary.
Let's dive into the Compute 100. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice or an offer to buy or sell any securities.
So what was the company that you were doing before?
It was called VMAccel. And so we were doing FPGAs in the cloud. And so we were working with chip providers, Xilinx and Altera, who had just got acquired by Intel. And so we had one of the largest FPGA clouds previously. This was started in 2018, got set up in Wyoming. And we had this thesis that you can squeeze more performance out of an FPGA if you knew what you were doing than you can get out of a GPU. And if we can figure out how to squeeze that extra juice out, we were onto something. And then we realized the amount of complexity it takes to squeeze out that extra performance wasn't worth the squeeze. Mm-hmm. And so we had been doing it for about 6 years at the time. And one of the chip providers we were working with was Xilinx, and Xilinx had gotten acquired by AMD. And this
was like 2015, 2016?
No, this was in 2021, 22.
Okay.
But the company you've been building for...
So we started it in 2018.
Okay, got it.
And how did, sorry, I want to get back to it, but what was your background to be doing a FPGA cloud, squeezing juice out of FPGAs?
So I wasn't technical at all. This was my sixth company at the time, and I had started a bunch of things from a gym to an education platform to e-commerce business, events company. I was really good at just connecting people and dots and making businesses and ideas a reality. And so I was traveling around the United States doing these workshops for entrepreneurs and VCs on how to make great ideas a reality. And I was doing one at this university in Southwest Michigan. And they're like, you got to meet this kid. Like, we never met a kid like him, math, physics, engineering student, building a business out of his dorm room. And when I met him, he was already working on this infrastructure project. And he was coming to me asking for help to raise about $500,000. And we ended up not raising $500,000, we ended up raising $5 million and going off to the races. And so at the time, if I get a little personal, I went through a divorce at that time. And I was like, I got nothing else to do. Let me jump in and continue to help on the business side, not having any technical background at all, diving into the deepest end of the pool with FPGAs. Like, the FPGAs are the folk that make stuff for the engineers, that make stuff for those guys, because there's an FPGA in your Tesla, there's an FPGA in your phone, like, it's, super low latency use cases. And dove into the deep end and learned quickly, like literally lived in the data center in Wyoming early on. And so we did that for about 6 years, really just fighting it out to put something together. There was no FPGA clouds at the time. AWS and Azure had an offering, but it was just off on the side in their whole kind of Las Vegas buffet of offerings that they have. And so, it put us in a great place. And when Xilinx got acquired by AMD, our company worked very closely with AMD. We became AMD's internal FPGA cloud. And so they would send us all of their latest and greatest FPGAs, and we'd get them deployed and debugged for them. And so it's what we cut our teeth on. But my co-founder, Darrick, who's the CEO, he's the technical brains behind this, going really deep into the stack.
And so you guys, both companies?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had started VMAccel together.
Cool.
And then also launched Tensorwave together.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
What's he like?
He has an amazing story. So like I said, when I met him, he was a sophomore in college, math, physics, engineering student, and he's 90% deaf.
Wow.
Which is also unique to somebody his age who's ambitious as he is. And he had lost 90% of his hearing in a skateboard accident. He was going down a hill without a helmet, fell, cracked his head open. Cops found him on the side of the road, and he woke up a few days from a coma. And when they did all the brain scans, they found out that he had a tumor on the right side of his brain. And so technically the accident saved his life. And but they had to remove the tumor, but it was connected towards his auditory nerve, and cut it out. Became 100% deaf on his right ear, and then because of the accident, he got Meniere's disease. And so it fluctuates. He could be mostly deaf one day, he can kind of hear some days, but to have that happen his senior year of high school, have to relearn how to listen and learn again, to then become a triple major at his undergrad, still 4.0, president of Engineers Without Borders, building a business out of his dorm room. He was a unique kid. Like all the professors at this university, like we've never met a kid like this. But he's just very quiet, focused. And when I asked him early on, I was like, how are you able to do this? He's like, I have nothing else to do. Like I literally can't go out. I can't go to networking events. I can't even party or go to the movies or anything like that. It just helps me hyper focus. And so he was always just, working on finding the most efficient and best ways to build out infrastructure. He cut his teeth early on with blockchain, doing some of that, but he always knew that the long-term opportunity was going to be cloud. Jeff Bezos calls cloud the infinite market cap opportunity. And so early on in that space, it was taking the efficiencies that he had learned from blockchain and deploying infrastructure there and bringing that over into cloud to match that. And so he was the deeply technical one. And so he and I were working, hand in hand to build the last company up in Wyoming. And then we were trying to figure out what to do since the FPGA market was still fairly small, and especially in the cloud, like there weren't very many companies who wanted this offering. We created a solution to something not a lot of people had a problem that they wanted to solve. And we were trying to figure out what to do. We needed a pivot. We had about 6 months left of runway, and we were thinking about pivoting into micro edge data centers where we can do composable infrastructure at the edge to support smart cities. But even that would have been very capital intensive. We felt like the components of the stack weren't there yet, so it still was very speculative. And we were trying to figure out what to do. And then we were at this, since our company was in Wyoming, every year they had the Wyoming Tech Summit. And
how big was that event?
Not very big. I mean, we were kind of the big fish in a small pond, but this is where all of the people from the state, the government, like Peter Thiel and everybody comes together in Jackson Hole for a day. To share what's happening. And so we were there, and we'd go every year, and we decided to go, this was in 2023. This is kind of our like, hey, let's go one more time before we kind of figure out what we're doing next, and maybe something will spark. After that, we ended up at the after party at somebody's house, and somebody came up to us because he heard us talk about doing cloud computing. And I said, hey, you guys are in cloud. Like he was a VC, and he said, hey, between our portfolio companies, about $1 billion has been deployed, but we can't get access to any Nvidia chips. Can you guys help us? And we're like, we're more focused on AMD and FPGAs. I mean, we probably could help, but this is at a time when nobody can get access to GPUs.
Right.
The supply constraint was pretty massive. And I remember asking him, I said, do you think any of your portfolio companies would consider AMD? Because AMD had just announced their rival to the Nvidia H100, the MI300X. And he said something that changed the trajectory of everything for us. He says, as long as it works, absolutely, we'll put it in front of our portfolio companies and push it. We just need them to spend the money and get to work. And so that next day, we're like, this is it. We need to go all in since we already have the relationship with AMD. We created Tensorwave and called AMD and says we need a significant GPU allocation. And a few months later, we were launched as AMD's official GPU cloud partners in December. So this was September, we had this conversation. And then in December, we were officially launched and off to the races and raised our first little bit of money.
So I'm curious about how you solve, like the first thing that comes to mind is the software challenge.
Yeah.
And you've got a podcast too, right?
Yeah.
Beyond CUDA or something?
Yeah, that's right.
So
How do you go beyond CUDA?
Yeah, how do you go beyond CUDA? So you get a bunch of GPUs, you have some VCs, like my founders want GPUs. They're not looking for AMD chips.
Yeah.
There's this idea out there of like the CUDA moat and it being so hard to get people to commit to other hardware.
Yeah.
Talk to us.
And that was like so strong at the end of 2023.
Yeah, I think it's
That's
loosened a
evolved
lot. Yeah,
today,
for sure.
but like I would love to hear.
It was.
I feel like someone saying like an AMD cloud in 2023 would be like
Crazy.
It's impossible.
No,
so.
it was unintuitive.
Yeah.
Even when we were first raising our first $4 million, we just needed to raise $4 million to buy the chips to prove to VCs that you can run AI workloads on AMD. And luckily, there was one article that Databricks had just put out. They showcased how you can switch from Nvidia to AMD, from CUDA to ROCm, and it just works out of the box. And we took that article and shopped it around to every single VC and said, see, look at Databricks says it works, therefore it will. And so we were able to raise our first $4 million to get our first chips. Then we proved to them that it actually does work.
And by proving it to them, was that you had shown like equivalent performance or something along those lines?
So we bought a small cluster of GPUs, I think 128 GPUs at the time, to got them deployed and then showed them that, hey, this does work. And we got some early customers on who just wanted access to compute. And at the time, yes, there was the supply constraint issue, but we're also seeing that people were tired of just giving their margin to Jensen. Like they're like, because he had the monopoly, because he had the quote unquote, the moat, he could demand the 80% plus profit margins on the chips, which for him, it works out great, but for the overall AI market isn't sustainable at scale. And so we knew there needed to be choice in the market. We had already worked with AMD, and we saw the roadmap that Lisa had laid out with her GPUs being built on open source and open standards. And one of the things that, you know, we believed early on is that like creating walled gardens, you know, isn't, you know, it works for the, you know, for the person who's creating the thing. But for the customer, I mean, it doesn't work out well. And so we knew there needed to be an option. We knew AMD was the best solution. But then there was the perception that that the software stack wouldn't work. And it's like, you know, we're so used to using an iPhone. Most people are so used to using an iPhone. When you put an Android in front of somebody, it's like, I don't even know what to do with this. Like and so a lot of people had the same response to AMD. They're like, I'm so used to using Nvidia. You know, Jensen did a great job building out, you know, his CUDA ecosystem. He's been developing it for over 20 years. He kind of forced it on the GPUs early on. So early gamers who were using those, you know, consumer GPUs had to learn CUDA. They were forced to do it. And so he had gotten it into research labs at universities. He'd gotten it into the consumer GPUs early on. So he had done 20 years of just getting people used to this ecosystem over time. And with that comes docs. And if you run into a bug, you can search it. And so the SEO shows up on AMD that didn't exist at all. And so it was our first initial large gap that we needed to close. There were those, like the early adopters, were people who had worked on a lot of the big research labs who had built out, you know, supercomputers that were working with AMD's, you know, high performance chips at the time. And so they were used to figuring out what was needed to scale out compute on AMD and the tricky parts that were involved. And so a lot of those people who were like, yes, we're down to help bring down the monopoly with Nvidia and overcome this moat, jumped in early. And so, ROCm it felt kind of duct taped early on. There wasn't a lot of resources behind it. And it was a struggle for the first few months. And investors were like, is this thing going to work? Is AMD really going to get, you know, their stuff together to make it scalable? And Lisa had made a lot of strategic investments in companies to acquire the support to help build out the software ecosystem and the services in order to support enterprises being able to jump on AMD at scale. And so one of the early things that, you know, is a double-edged sword is we allowed semi-analysis to get access to one of our nodes. I don't know if you know Dylan Patel and his crew out there. And we gave them access to a node and said, hey, like, tear this thing apart, you know, rip off the veil and show what the issues are. And so he was working on it for about 5 or 6 months, like him and his team, and wanting to portray AMD in the best light possible. And so his article came out in 2024 of December and just tore the MI300X like apart. And the story goes, the next day, Lisa jumps on the phone with him and his team, like, what are you doing? And he said, I got the receipts. I literally tried to showcase, you know, the MI300X in the best light possible. And Lisa looks at her team and said, is this true? And the team was like, yes, Dylan has tried to portray this in the best light possible. And Lisa says, thank you for that. And Lisa applied, you know, as much resources and pressure to her team to say, hey, we have to figure this out. We have to put together the resources to build out the ecosystem.
What were the shortcomings? Like, what were like sort of top 3 shortcomings that he reported on that Lisa found to be like, wait, that's true? I mean, it's an amazing moment of a CEO kind of
It is.
taking some tough medicine.
It is. I think when AMD first started selling their GPUs, they were selling them to hyperscalers who don't necessarily need a lot of the software to scale out the infrastructure. They use a lot of their own custom software to do it. And so when you're wanting to launch and sell GPUs at scale, that makes sense, right? But when you start getting into the hands of developers and there aren't resources available, that's when things get tricky. So there weren't any resources, there weren't any docs. There wasn't any CI/CD available, so that when there were updates on VLLM or SGLang or any of these other open source frameworks that most of the people were using for their inference and for training, AMD was always behind. And so...
and is that what Dylan was struggling? Because I would think if he was like going through the pain of it,
Yeah.
that he would be able to deal with that. Or
his team was able to deal with it, but it was just exposing that at scale, it's not going to work for the...
like you keep hitting roadblocks, you keep on getting like set back from...
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
And there was just there was a gap.
It was a huge gap. It was a huge gap. Dylan and his team helped make those things aware, and...
but from like a flops basis, was there a huge gap?
Huge gap. And so they had like the theoretical flops that they advertised. Hey, like over time, as ROCm gets better, it starts off with 50%, flops utilization. And over time, it'll continue to get better and better. It'll literally, the chip will become more valuable as our upgrades get better and better over time. And it wasn't happening fast enough. And so the marketing flops didn't reach the actual flops. And so, anyway, to Lisa's credit, she and her team did a lot of great work to build out the developer ecosystem with Anush over there, who's the VP of AI software, and Ramin, who is one of the VPs who's building out the developer ecosystem for AMD, went all in. And it almost felt like they were going 24/7 to build out the resources, to build out the CI/CD clusters to support the open source framework so they can stay up to speed, and to ultimately close the gap. And over time, more and more, they were able to close the gap. And Anush gets asked all of the time, what is the thing that's helping to close the gap? And he says speed. Like they're able to work very fast to help keep up with the Nvidia moat. And one of the things is as I've done the podcast Beyond CUDA and talked to a lot of people who were there at the very beginning when Jensen built CUDA, who've been involved the last 20 years, they said CUDA is actually not the moat. It's the ecosystem that Jensen has built that is the moat. And so he's done a great job. He has 20 years and over 20,000 plus developers that have been working on this, plus the docs and resources to help with this. And yeah, it's now with that, it's starting to close. And so that's where we've come in to help support AMD in building out the ecosystem, which is why, it's intentional for us to be 100% dedicated to AMD to help them build out that ecosystem to help fill the gap. And now with agents and with codecs and Claude and all of the things that are possible today, like you could see Jensen is shaking in his boots. The CUDA is you can recreate and port CUDA code and kernels easier today with AI and agents than ever before. So the thing he created that had the moat is now, cannibalizing his moat itself. And so jumping in to help support AMD to continue to build out that ecosystem is what my focus has been on the AMD front.
And I imagine that a lot of the gap that AMD also saw was in that they didn't have just fairly as many deployments, like the scale of deployments where they could actually learn how is our networking working, how is our power working, what does our efficiency look like at scale. And so you being that partner, like I would love to hear more about what the things were that started to come up as you guys were deploying thousands, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And what is the scale where you guys are now?
So we currently have 12,000 GPUs deploying another 12,000 before the end of the year. And then we'll be doing hundreds of thousands in 2027. And so even in the early days, putting together a cluster of 8 nodes and scaling from 8 to 16 to beyond that had its obstacles. All of it, having to do with porting from, Nvidia has like Nickel, which is their collective communications tool, to AMD's version, RICL, which is their communications tool. And it's so the biggest marketing push that AMD has is that you get a lot more compute. Like the hardware that AMD put out is superior hardware It's the software where the gap is. And with that, hardware advantage comes a TCO advantage where there's more memory. You can run larger models on fewer GPUs. And so you technically can save more money. And so getting it past procurement was easy. But then once you get into the hands of the developers, they're like, we don't want to touch this thing. And then they're afraid that they're going to have to hire more engineers that are specialized in AMD. And so the switching costs would kind of make up the difference. And so to your point, you had mentioned, since there weren't a lot of people out there, for us, it was in the very beginning, it was, doing everything we could to give people access, saying, hey, like, did you know AMD has a viable solution? And giving them free access to run POCs and do joint projects together. And once they could see, like, okay, cool. Like AMD started off with optimizing for inference. A lot of the like Meta's inference at the time was all running on AMD GPUs, and OpenAI and some of the rest were all starting to run, but it was only on the inference side. And then starting to give access to more labs to do training was also the big piece as well, and showcase that yes, you can do training on AMD. And we've seen, like, the first year was tough. It was literally begging people, hey, try this, it works. We'll hold your hand the whole step of the way. Like,
And are you wanting to have, with your cloud, are you offering training or inference or both?
both.
Both. Who are you selling to?
The native Neo labs of the world. Labs that need chips at scale. A lot of them are labs that need access to chips immediately, and those that are willing to try AMD. And what we've seen, like from the very beginning, is we heard time and time again that that people were tired of giving their margin to Jensen, and they needed optionality. They needed something to compete with the market.
Is that enough though for training? Is like you have 48,000 GPUs. How long do people spend training them? Like, I'm trying to think of, like, who's the customer who says, like, yeah, I want those. So because we think right now of, like, the people that want to do training is like massive campuses.
The big ones.
100,000.
Yeah. So those that are doing training now are doing it at a smaller scale.
Yeah.
So they would need, people are renting 8 nodes or 16 nodes or 32 nodes. Eventual AI, Ashish Vaswamy, who was one of the original authors of the Attention is All You Need paper, was one of the first big Neo labs to go all in on AMD, and he had a cluster of 1,000 AMD MI300s, and showcased being able to train, do a training run for models at scale. And so he's done a few really great papers showcasing their work. There's quite a few other labs that are also doing training, but it took the Essentials, and it took some of these others now. Zyphra is another company that just put out work being done and showcasing training at scale. Now they're not doing state of the art large models, the equivalent to OpenAI or Anthropic, but the models they are training are having a great impact. And so we're seeing it more, and now we're starting to see the momentum, and it's kind of an inflection point where at first it was 90% inference customers, 10% training and fine tuning, to now, like, I would say it's switching to at least 60% inference, 40% training, and more. So it's like our largest cluster, the one we did 8,000 MI325s, which was one unified training cluster, just to showcase that you can do training on AMD at scale. And so once we're able to connect it and prove that out, we started to see a lot more interest. At first, because of the skepticism around AMD, we thought, hey, we can just kind of pre-sell, like, hey, here's the specs, here's what you can do, like, sign up, and then we'll go build it for you. And that didn't work. Like, people were too skeptical. They're like, no, we're not going to do it. We're really comfortable on the Nvidia side. And then once we realized, like, hey, we're going to just build this thing and show them in partnership with AMD that it does work, is kind of the field of dreams, build it and they will come model. It worked. All of a sudden we saw, like, once we had the 8,000 GPUs and once we showcased that training worked at scale, we started to see a flood of customers coming in. This was last year.
Cool. And so you just did a big round?
We did. We just officially closed our Series B.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. I mean, it was hard, man. It was hard to fundraise for this early on. We started in 2023. like in November. This was like right before Thanksgiving, which is like the worst time to raise money. And we were, you know, grateful for any money we could get early on, and raised $4 million, which spun up to about, we did a safe round of $40 million for our seed round, and then raised $100 million for our Series A, and then just closed a $300 million Series B.
Nice,
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's been moving fast. It was an internal round, so the same investors just re-upped, and excited about the momentum and speed that has been happening over the last few years. And so yeah, it feels, I'm grateful for the support we have from our investors. AMD has, you know, co-led the last 2 rounds along with Magnetar. Magnetar led the CoreWeave rounds, took them from seed to IPO, and have been able to be a great support and resource for us to help kind of rinse and repeat the same lessons that they worked on with them, with us.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I imagine a lot of the story for Series B, it feels like last year was the non-NVIDIA stack has potential in this market. And it feels like this year, a lot of the story is around like the non-NVIDIA stack and then some, you know, this whole like future of disaggregated compute feeling like a story that a lot of people are telling the market. How are you guys feeling about that as a tailwind in terms of the market moving not just to AMD, but to Groq, Cerebras, and the rest of the stack that's evolving beyond that?
Yeah. I mean, that was our thesis from the beginning, is there needed to be optionality in the market. And we saw that AMD was the next best option. So let's go all in to be the best to resource this. So yeah, for us, it's really exciting to see the momentum and resources. You saw both OpenAI and Meta made significant announcements saying that they're going to do 6 gigawatts each of capacity over the next 3 to 5 years. And since then,
with AMD,
with AMD, and we're seeing more with OpenAI, you know, announcing that they're going to do some stuff with Cerebras, and then obviously Groq, you know, getting bought out by Nvidia. To us, it just shows that, you know, the market wasn't sustainable with one chip provider, and it has to be diversified. And to us, it's exciting. You know, whatever we can do to provide that support at scale and see more people do it is great.
How does it feel as a founder building in what is the most intense market of AI, probably after the model companies, which is the compute layer, where on the one hand, there's just this sort of tsunami of demand. On the other hand, you have all of this market education to get people to believe that AMD can become a real true force. And it's interesting because the disaggregated compute narrative almost skips over the AMD idea. Mm-hmm. It's like when we invested in Etched, it was like, okay, there's Nvidia, then there's AMD, there's custom projects, and then we believe there could be like an inference opportunity. Now it's like there's disaggregated inference between prefilled decode and different chips for doing different things, and a lot of attention there, but not necessarily a lot of actual scale there. Whereas there's real scale with AMD, but it's still a small percentage of anyone's portfolio of hardware. Like, how does that feel viscerally as a founder? Like, do you just have like too much demand that you can do with, and you just need to figure out how to scale, or are you like, we got to educate the market that this is a real option?
Yeah, both, both, and I feel like it has been we are the marketing arm for AMD to help get the word out to the masses that there is an option, that AMD is viable, and you can do training and inference at scale with AMD. And for us, the goal was always to abstract it away altogether, so you don't even know what's under the hood. So whatever chip you're using underneath, like, you're just getting access to the tokens. And so yeah, for us, on the education side, like, it was easy to cut through the noise, which is why I had to build out kind of the Beyond CUDA thing to help poke the bear at NVIDIA and bring together the people and showcase all of the work that's being done outside of the NVIDIA ecosystem. So that's something that I love doing. Now, what also it works in our favor is that we're AMD only, and there are other neoclouds out there that are NVIDIA neoclouds that are adding AMD to their stack. And what we have seen and what we've heard a lot of stories is that, I mean, Jensen is the one who ultimately controls the allocation list. And so there's 150 plus neoclouds that are out there in the Nvidia ecosystem. I couldn't even imagine, trying to compete in that bloodbath for compute when there's not even 150 Neolabs out there for that amount of compute. Like it's bizarre to me. But we're one of one when it comes to AMD only. And we don't have to worry about playing that politic game with Nvidia to think like, hey, if we showcase our support for AMD, that will be moved to the bottom of the allocation list. And so it gave us the freedom to go all in and support AMD at scale. And so we're excited. We're excited to see more chips come into the game. We're excited to see, ultimately make it as easy as possible for the end user. And for us, we're using that means of AMD to do it, to help create tokens. The fact that we are one of one makes it easier to reach the masses and educate the market and not have to be dictated by the, kind of the demands of Nvidia and that side of things. So makes it a little easier to differentiate in that regard, especially when people start seeing these announcements that more and more labs are using AMD. We become the de facto in that space. And so, like I said, the bloodbath on the Nvidia neocloud side, I wouldn't even do that. That's not even something that would be interesting to me, because we've been asked. We have customers that come to us, say, yes, we're interested in AMD, but would you do AMD and Nvidia? And we said, no, like you can go find somebody else to do that. We've turned down a lot of deals and a lot of money to the tune of like 10, 11 figures. To stay consistent with our thesis all the way through. And, people thought it was crazy. Even VCs were like, hey, maybe we should consider it. Because in the early days with AMD, it was tough. It was, people were buying smaller tranches. But now, and like you said, coming up with educating the market, these big announcements helped create tailwinds in the market. But now with the demand being so big, you can't even find capacity at the Nvidia neoclouds. It's forcing people to be like, hey, we'll take compute anywhere we can get it. And now that AMD is a lot easier, it's a no-brainer for them to come our way. And so now it's not even a chip game where anybody can get access to GPUs, but where are you going to plug them in? Yeah. Where are you going to get access to the power?
Yeah. So maybe can we talk about that? What's the infrastructure behind Tensorwave?
Infrastructure,
like the data centers, where are you? How much power?
So, that's our sweet spot is being able to acquire data center power and lock it up and get it as quickly as possible. So we currently have roughly 50 megawatts that's live, and then scaling into 300 megawatts by Q1 of 2027, and then going into gigawatts by the end of 2027. And so it becomes, certain, like the larger players, they want as much, power in one place so they can run these larger training runs, which we are able to lock up and secure. But on the inference side, when they're trying to they just say, hey, get us access to as many 5 to 20 megawatt sites as we can that could be available in Q4, Q1 of next year. And so that's what we have a team dedicated to power and data center acquisition. And we have to move fast. That really is the name of the game right now. Like I said, getting access to GPUs is not the hard part.
Take us into what is that team doing? Because this is what people say is like getting access to the power right now is incredibly the bottleneck. There's this regulatory challenge. On day to day, what's that team doing?
And how many different unique sites are you guys managing? Is that team managing in terms of?
Right. When it comes to the leads that are coming in, it's hundreds, and all of them have to be, the due diligence on all of them. How many of them are ready? What kind of power? When will that power be ready? What is the timeline? What is the actual timelines? And so it's putting together a team. All these brokers are coming in. So there's these guys who had built power and data centers, 15, 20 years ago that are like the old, real estate heads that are now able to really capitalize on making those investments a while ago that, we have to work with. So our team works with a team of brokers that are out scouring, North America for compute, which is our primary focus right now.
And are they mainly looking for sites you can kind of turn over, maybe like an industrial site that has access to power that you can turn over? Or are they looking at powered shells?
Anything, greenfield powered shells, anything we can get access to as quickly as possible. And we have a huge team that is working with a large team of brokers and we get hundreds of, I get inbounds every day saying, hey, we have this site, it'll be ready now.
Interesting. And so then are they going on site to check it out?
I mean, once it passes the first few due diligence questions and we fly out there, we'll do a site visit. And if it ticks all those boxes, work on getting
What are some of the boxes it needs to tick?
I mean, it needs to have power available within the time frame that we need to get it in. And that's basically it.
Is there any question about like the permitting, or I'm curious about
permitting is big. I mean, when you see right now, like a lot of data center projects are being stalled out by local government and the protesters that are concerned about what are data centers doing to our society? Is it taking all of our water? Is it going to take shoot power prices up? And there's going to be a buzzing in our community as a result? Is it really not going to provide all of these jobs? Like there's a lot of issues that are starting to arise, or a lot of people are bringing these issues to the forefront that have to be addressed in a real way in some of these communities where like if you're building these gigawatt scale sites, it takes thousands of people to do it, and so you literally have to like move in these plumbers and electricians and construction workers into these towns in order to support these projects at scale and work with the local government in order to get the permitting to do these projects, which it's an interesting time. I think there's a lot of misconception around data centers and power, and I think there's a lot of fear when it comes to AI, and is it going to take away our jobs, and is it going to make our kids dumber and not be able to scale? And it's interesting. They talk about the perception of AI in China. It's actually really positive, and the impact that AI is going to make society better. But for some reason in North America, like we have this, like our media has made it in such a way where if we can instill fear in people and say, hey, it gets more views, but that's really not the case. Like AI is gonna, cure disease and make our lives easier and do a whole lot more things. And so helping change that perception in these local communities in order to get the permitting, in order to, scale out these projects is gonna be really important moving forward so that people have the proper perception, because the way traditional data centers have been built, it did use a lot of water. Hundreds of millions of gallons every year these hyperscalers will suck up per data center.
I feel like you could do a much better job. What's that? The Shark Tank guy that right now is
Kevin O'Leary.
Kevin O'Leary. It seems to be like the worst spokesperson possible.
He's struggling. He's struggling, and if you see you see the typical data centers that they did use a lot of water, but all of our data centers are direct to chip liquid cooled, which is a small fraction of the water necessary to use it. And it's so much more essential, and we need more people to speak out and be educated on these things, and not just the TV hosts like Kevin O'Leary who are
not so related.
Like he's helping.
It's sort of like it's part of the problem, because there's a relatability factor
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And so, but it's going to take more education. It's going to take less division, and or else we're going to get left behind.
Hey, you're like, okay, so that's a whole other track. You're like you're in the middle of really the political cultural battle right now that is intensifying. How has that how has that been for you over the past year? How much of your week do you spend thinking about this, like dealing with it?
A lot.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot more. Like this is just in the last 6 months. Because I feel like before it was all about chips, and then they were like, okay, we don't have access to power. We need to go, create as much, alternative power solutions as possible. We need nuclear power plants and all this kind of stuff, but we just can't move fast enough to keep up with the current demand. And so getting access, so now we have to find as many power solutions as possible. When you think of, it's like before, all the hyperscalers had this dream of being carbon neutral by like 2030, right? And getting all their data centers and everything to that certain place. But once AI took off, like all of that went out the window, and then we need access to power by any means necessary, coal, whatever. We're willing to do it, and they're just like, we're just gonna let AI help solve this problem. Which I get, but it's put us in a position now where getting access to power by any means necessary is, it just takes an education as to, hey, this is the efficient ways that it's being done. This is how it is going to benefit your community. These are the things you don't need to be afraid of. And so, yeah, we do. And we see it. I get inbounds every day of, people on TikTok and Instagram who are talking about their concerns about data centers and AI and the impact. And, yeah, unfortunately it's by people who are genuinely concerned, but they don't understand the full scope, that if we don't keep up with the pace and speed we need to go, we're going to be left behind. And if we're left behind, it's going to put us in a very weak position as a nation. And so, there is this, decel and excel, AI movement where these accelerate folk are just like, gas all the way to the floor. Like either we're going to, we're all going to be destroyed, or, AI is going to help save the world, but let's just get there as fast as possible and figure this thing out. And the decel are like, hey, pump the brakes, let's slow down, let's figure out some policies and other things around it in order to figure out if we could do it. And I think there's a healthy medium that has to be found. And one of the things that we talk about internally is, accelerate responsibly. Is this thing where we have to go fast, we have to do what's necessary to keep up, but we also need to be thinking about how are we going to do it, and how is it going to be done responsibly, and how do you educate, these city folk that are, making some of these decisions to delay. And a lot of these, there's moratoriums going in across the United States right now, and it's going to and to their credit, it's they just said we need 6 months to like do some research on this stuff, and I'm like, we don't have 6 months. We got to move fast. And so, so I do spend a lot of time. Our team spends a lot of time with some of the sites that we've selected, with city council, with educating, with working with more and more folk to help get them caught up to speed, because there is a visceral response to it. And I get it, but we can't slow down progress.
Do you feel like you get it more than most of the people who are in your situation?
I mean, yeah, because we're at the front lines. Like, we feel it.
But you also just strike me as somebody who's, I don't know what the best way to put it is, like a little bit more relatable, like able to connect with a broader range of people.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people in the tech world, when they get too far outside of the tech world, it's like they just don't even know how to like
talking a whole nother language.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I think
this could be like a superpower for you guys.
I think it is. I think it's something. I mean, frankly, just in the last couple of months, it's something that we've had to be really intentional on. We've had data centers that have had potential moratoriums that have been put on projects that we were working on, and we're able to help navigate.
And so you like going to city council meetings?
Yeah, city council, having meetings with people and creating education campaigns and doing whatever we need.
Do you like this?
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. Like I've always been.
Part of why I say, I guess, just to be, I think a lot of people, when they're so dismissive of the concerns of just like, you're just an idiot for thinking that we need to slow down.
Yeah.
And every way you're framing it is like, I get where it comes from. And like, if you get that kind of information, that's where what you should be thinking for your community. And so that empathy allows you to sort of show up differently.
Yeah. Accelerate responsibly. Like that's our thing that we think is essential now. Like we can't slow down, but we need to be thinking about how we can't be dismissive. If we're dismissive, then maybe there is something that we're hiding, or maybe this is really just for the money. But no, like this is going to help advance society. It's going to help solve a lot of the problems that there's a lot of unknowns that I believe AI is going to help us solve. And, we have the tools literally at our disposal to be able to do it. Do we know how to use the tools? No, like we're still like just scraping the surface. And so I do think with time, with more discussion, there will be a lot of progress, but it's not going to be without resistance. So I'm okay with it. I love, like that's where I do thrive, is in being at the cutting edge and helping evangelize, these things that need the crossover into, hey, why should we do this? I'll never forget, one of my last businesses was in a town, it was in a college town. It was a town of like 4,000 people. And they had an issue with a food truck being in town. They're like, oh, this food truck is going to take away business from our local bar. I'm like, this is a town with college kids. Like, college kids need options. And so, like, is that going to take away business from the bar? No, it's just going to provide more options. It's going to elevate, the whole society and kind of feeling and vibe of the town altogether. It's not going to take away things. It's only going to add to. And so I think finding ways to educate these towns, it takes time, patience, but we need to move fast on that.
One other thing that, we as the US need to move fast on, that you guys are also taking a big bet on at Tensorwave, is open source models. And so would love to hear, Nvidia has been training open source models. I know they just had GTC last night and are announcing more. How are you feeling about, AMD's path there, and also how the move to open source for a lot of companies is going to be really big for Tensorwave?
Yeah, I love it. I think there needs to be more open source. We see the big state-of-the-art frontier model labs and the amount of resources and compute it's going to take to sustain just OpenAI and Anthropic. And we even saw how X is now allocating Colossus to Anthropic. But the amount of compute needed just for those two is crazy. So I do think there needs to be a lot more, general open source, open standards models done at the frontier level, so that they can be fine-tuned with less resources to be application specific, which will help reduce the amount of resources that are used at scale. So I do think that's necessary to do. And I think Essential did a great job. Like, his whole goal was to be the DeepSeek of the West. And we see a lot more companies like Zyphra and others that are creating these open source, open weight models that I think are important for us to be able to emphasize at scale. So I think it's needed now more than ever. And there's the debate around, which should we be more focused on open weight and open source? And it's kind of always been this in the open source community, where you have the proprietary and the open source is kind of just lagging behind just a little bit to try to keep up. And so you kind of need both to exist in order for there to be a sustainable ecosystem. But I think there needs to be a lot more resources, money put into the open weight, open model market, because a lot of investors, I've seen a lot of these labs struggle with raising money because they don't see the direct commercial, because the model, what do they say, is like one of the fastest depreciating businesses. As soon as a model's released, the next one comes out and that one is worth pennies after that. And so if they're like, wow, if you're doing it for the open source, open weight ecosystem, that's even worse if you don't have a direct path to monetization and commercialization. And so I do think it's necessary. We saw what happened with DeepSeek and what they've been able to do. I think the United States does need their DeepSeek of the West. And there's a few labs that are working on it that I'm bullish on. And we've seen projects. So we did a project with AT&T. One of the things that we're very proud of at Tensorwave is we built an open source training and inference stack called Scalar LM. One of the original guys who worked on CUDA, Greg Diamos, he had worked with Nvidia, Intel, AMD, started his own lab built on AMD. And then he's joined us as a researcher who's built out and maintains our Scalar LM, which is a unified open and training stack. And what that means is you can, and it's the only GPU agnostic training and inference stack. And it allows you, because NVIDIA has their training and inference stack and AMD has their training inference stack, but neither of those are interchangeable. And so we are able to, or the end user is able to use both their NVIDIA stack and their AMD stack in one platform with Scalar. And so we were able to test this out, and we saw that the enterprise is looking for a solution. They don't want to be locked into one. They say that's one of the biggest reasons. Like, a lot of enterprises have a clause in their procurement that if there's only one vendor, like they can't take on that. They need multiple options in order for them to acquire anything. And when NVIDIA was the only solution, they were all stuck. And now that there are more solutions, they don't want to be all NVIDIA and they don't want to be all AMD. They want the ability to go back and forth. And so when we launched this platform, AT&T came to us and they were able to showcase using Essential's open weight model, an open telco model, and fine tune it for their use case that outperformed everything else. And the thing that was the most appealing to them was the ability to switch between their NVIDIA stack and their AMD stack, and to be able to do it at scale. And so we do feel like like we're at the cusp of breaking into enterprises, jumping into AMD, because our primary focus, you asked at the very beginning, who's our customers? It's the neolabs. It's the top 20 neolabs of the world. And because they already understand GPUs, they understand clusters at scale, but the enterprise takes a lot more handholding and that managed professional service to support them. Even AT&T at some point, they're like, hey, we need an extra like 15 hands to jump in and support us for their like 256 GPU cluster. Like, we're not going to hire an extra 15 people to support 256 GPUs. But I see now the enterprise, now that they have access, now that they can switch, now that there is a way to make it easier, there's a lot of pent-up demand behind the enterprise. And I do think creating that open platform and giving them access to open weights so they can fine-tune it so that all their data is not plugged back in to OpenAI or Anthropic, that gives them a lot more optionality. And so long story short, I'm very bullish on those projects. I think more resources needs to be put into this market. And we can't be scared. Scared money don't make money. Like, we have to go in, we have to take these big risks and be more aggressive, be more open. And I think we will win, which I am excited about.
Sounds like a good plug for Tensorwave. If anybody's building the next DeepSeek in America, go work with you
Please,
guys.
we'd love to. Yeah, we're happy. We'd love to support. And any way we can support training and inference at scale. That's what we're here for.
Where does this scared money don't make money? Where did you learn that expression? I've never heard it before, but it makes sense. Did you just...
I just think it's, it was funny. I was just, we're in Vegas and we were hanging out with some friends at the blackjack table.
Sounds like something you'd say at a blackjack
table. And you have to be able to take a bet, because as an entrepreneur, this is my 7th company. And like I said, in the very beginning, when we were talking to VCs, the analysts were like, this doesn't make sense. But we knew, deep down inside, yes, it doesn't make sense now. It's unintuitive now. But if we make the bet now, it will pay off later. And so I do think that, you have to, I've always been an all chips in guy, leave everything on the table and take the big bets and risks that are needed to get where we're at today. And we wouldn't be here if our team hadn't done this. And so, if you're you got to be able to, and I get it, when it's my money, it's easier to do, right? But as a VC, you're managing other people's money. So you have to be very calculated and intentional on the bets that you're making. But, sitting on the side, where we're the one investing the time, the money, and the resources to make these things happen. It's a good place to be in. It's where, the bigger the bet, the bigger the risk. There's a lot of fear associated with it.
Yeah. All right, final question.
Yeah.
You've got an interesting view of the world right now. You're at the city council meeting. You're thinking about open weight models connected to AMD, building this cloud. What is something today that feels very non-obvious that you think is coming? The bet you've made is becoming more clearly a good bet. What's another bet that you want to be making or that you are making that you think the market is not yet seeing as credible?
I think it has to do with continued education of the market, because I do think power is a constraint, but it is the local government and the people who control access to progress. And so I do think more education, getting, the right information into the hands of the right people to help permeate this across North America is going to be very essential. And if we don't do it, if it stays stuck in, these echo chambers in Silicon Valley and others, and we don't find ways to integrate more holistically, we're not going to have the progress that we're hoping for. So I would be spending a lot more time and will be spending a lot more time on that in order for us to see continued progress and adoption at scale.
Cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. This was so fun.
Thank you for being here. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and let us know when there's going to be a day you're going to run for office.